This is the Life Story Podcast, Season 1, Episode 3, with Nakayla Legget. Vulnerability is your superpower. Hi, everyone. I am your host, Kaylee B., and this is the Life Story Podcast. The podcast is a platform for people to share their life stories. Right now, more than ever, we need to connect with each other, to empathize with each other, and the best way to do that is through sharing our stories. Listening to other stories reminds us that we're all human, we all go through pain and sorrow, and reminds us that we can find joy on the other side. During the first season of the Life Story podcast, our amazing guests are sharing stories of resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover after a stressful or traumatic event. It's bouncing back when we go through a hard time. Resilience is believing that there's something better on the other side of what we're experiencing right now. My guest today is Nakayla Legget, a licensed clinical therapist and an expert in trauma-informed therapy who is in the process of launching her own private practice. She is the author of a children's book on bullying, Mama, Why Is My Flower Wilting? And the anthology Unchain Me Mama, an Amazon bestseller. Congratulations.
Thank you.
She married her high school sweetheart, and together they have 3 sweet children. On today's episode, you'll hear Nakayla's story of resilience and hear her lessons on vulnerability and being super mom through really hard times. Nakayla, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Every time I hear that title, I'm like, oh my gosh, vulnerability is like my superpower. It should be most people's superpower because like it's such a powerful thing and such a hard thing.
It really is. It really is. And I know you've got a lot of really great little nuggets of wisdom on that. And I'm super excited for you to be able to share those. But I would love for you to start with your experience of motherhood, especially the difference between your first 2 children.
Yes. So like you said, I am a mother of 3. And I have 2 little girls and 1 little boy. And so my very first child is my son. He's 5. And that was almost like an easy experience for me. And now that I think about it, I think it was because I didn't have a blueprint of raising a son, but I knew what it was like to be a daughter. So I guess that takes me into like when my daughter was born, right? And so about 3 weeks into that experience, I started to experience what is called postpartum depression. Mm-hmm. And what that looked like was me not wanting to get out of bed. As soon as my husband's coming home from work, I was passing the baby off, not really wanting to like bond and like have that connection, not cleaning, not cooking, not doing all the things that what I thought was what a super mom, a super wife, and a super woman does. I was failing at all of those like tasks until a group of friends one day, they realized that like I was not being involved in our group chats, and I was zoning out when we would meet each other. Like they would be there, I would be there, but I physically would not be there. And so they called me out on it. And I had never had anybody to like really call me out on it because the way I protect myself, I armor up and I shut in. So I withdraw from people. And so I move away and I disconnect because like, I don't want you to see my flaws. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to see what I can't do. I want you to see everything I can do. And that's the superpower mentality, right? I need the cape, but I don't want you to see me when I go behind closed doors to like get my rest. And so that started to spill over into like what I was doing. And so like when they had that conversation with me, I had to have that conversation with myself and say, what are you doing? Because at the end of the day, that withdrawing is not only hurting me, but it's hurting everybody that I'm trying to protect. And so if I am doing the opposite of of my goal, like, do I need to sit down and reroute like where my destination and where my actual journey is taking me? And so that allowed me to sit down and honestly fight with vulnerability, like literally fight with it, because like in order to be vulnerable with someone else, I think it starts with you. You have to be vulnerable with yourself, acknowledging that there's a problem, acknowledging that I need to do something different. But that experience with my daughter was so it was like like it just took me to my lowest. Like I've had experience where I've been through traumatic and adverse experience, like just for being like African American, growing up in a impoverished like community. Like I've had those bounce back moments, but I think that one, it wasn't the only one, but it was the strongest hold.
Yeah.
I feel like I bounced back a little bit quicker with the other ones, and I feel like it was the strongest hold because you announced one of my books, um, Chain Me Mama, The Forgiveness Factor. And I wrote that book as my journey out of that deep, dark hole. And in that
Wow.
book is a letter to my daughter. And by me writing to her was my ability to really put those wounds out, unwrap the shame that was wrapped around it so I can grow, she can grow into this like beautiful woman, and I can blossom into the woman that I know that I could be, and the mother I know that I could be. So it was just an amazing journey, a humbling journey, and a hard journey. And I'm still on the journey. I'm still growing. So
Yeah, definitely.
that is my difference. It was glitz and glamour with my son, but it took me to a rocky place. And now we're at the glitz and glamour with my daughters. But I had to experience that rock bottom because there was something holding me hostage. There was a
Yeah.
little girl there that needed to survive and needed to grow in order for me to raise little girls.
Yeah, definitely. So you talked about having friends that kind of pulled you out of this a little bit. And I did want to talk about um, your experience being a Black woman suffering PPD. Women, moms in general, I also had PPD. I had no idea
Yeah.
because it just wasn't a thing that we talked about. But at least I had my skin color where doctors believe what I say. When I'm like, I'm upset, I'm in pain. Can you talk about the experience of being a Black mother and experiencing this and how that kind of, what happened when did you realize that you were going through it? Did you have doctors who were just like, whatever, you're fine. It's just new mom syndrome or whatever.
So being a therapist, I think that assisted a lot because,
Yeah.
like, one, unfortunately, there was fear there. Fear that, like what you were saying, like, are they going to believe me? Are they going to
Yeah.
automatically call Child Protective Services because I am a Black mom who is saying that I need support? Like, there was a lot of fear because there's a lot of stigma when it
Yeah.
comes to like getting support in the Black community. And so I probably needed support. That still trapped person and that traumatized little girl who like is trying to find her way, that trust issue kind of
Yeah.
popped up. And so I did not, like, I lied on when they said, are you smiling all the time? Are you crying? I lied. And I said yes, because I knew exactly what to say
Yeah.
to like keep that a secret. Because once again, like I said, I don't want you to see my flaws. One, as a mother, and then two, a therapist going through those things. And so that's a whole nother rumble
How
in
dare
itself.
you?
So like, how dare I like be experiencing these things? And so I knew
Yeah.
how to answer. And so that was some reckoning with myself too, to realize that like I'm answering these things dishonestly, and I
Yeah.
am asking my patients to also come in here and answer these things on an honor system, and I'm being dishonest, not only
Yeah.
with others but with myself. And so that allowed me to like open that floodgate.
Yeah. Wow. And then you had this amazing community of friends who
Yes.
you had been, I mean, you'd been really involved with them, right? You guys had a podcast before, which I love, but you had the the community around you.
Yes. Yes. Which was hard because like I for a long time I was the strong friend and not necessarily had a strong tribe. And so
Yeah.
like sometimes you look at groups of people and you can automatically see who's holding the most weight, not
Yeah.
necessarily because they have to, but because they feel like that's their role. And I felt like me
Yeah.
being the strong friend and keeping it together was my role. Like I was the oldest of five. And so in my household it was three, and then I had two siblings that did not live in my household, but at the end of the day I was the oldest. right?
Yeah.
So I'm protecting everybody in a sense, or I felt like I had to protect everybody. And then
Yeah.
at some points, because like my mom was experiencing so much emotional pain throughout and just trying to survive, like, being able to like maintain and manage a household. I felt
Mhm.
like I was like like I had to double hold it in. Like I'm holding in my sibling stuff and then I'm trying to hold it together to make sure that my mom's okay as well. And so it was a lot. It was a lot. And so as
Yeah.
I grew into adulthood, it was now survival. Like I'm now just trying to survive. I'm not thriving because I never knew what thriving actually was. I'm just surviving. And surviving says I'm always looking out for danger.
Yeah.
I'm always looking out for the next opportunity for me to put my armor up and for me to fight. Thriving says that like I am surrounded by love and like I can like let that guard down and just breathe. And
Yeah.
anybody that's always in survivor mode, like you're rarely experiencing the love language that you desire and you need. And
Yeah.
so when I that whole idea of like vulnerability meets resilience, I feel like pain and vulnerability, they are the two things that clash in that idea of resilience. And so you end up being at the top of a bridge and it's pain and so you're falling. And so by the time you get to the bottom, whatever you're hitting is that idea of resilience, and your level of vulnerability determines how much cushion is there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
The
that.
the honesty with yourself and then the
Yep.
honesty with others. So that
Totally.
they can only know to like create the fort or create the actual pillow and the cushion that you need if you speak it.
100%. I love that analogy so much. I love that imagery that when you open up about what's wrong, you create pathways to get out of it.
Yeah.
Whether it's through your community, whether it's through your own innovation, because usually when you're in a hard time, you've got limited resources. You have, either not enough friends or not enough money or not enough time or not enough energy, not enough strength. And with those limited resources, you have to be really creative. You have to be innovative and get out of that. But by
Yeah.
opening up, by being vulnerable, like you said,
Mhm.
those pillows start fluffing up. They start filling
Yeah,
with more stuff.
right. And when I am a huge fan of Brene Brown, and she has this
Yeah.
like amazing quote that I always reference on a daily almost. And
Yeah.
it was saying that shame was the most powerful master emotion. It's the idea that we are not enough. And so it's that very thing that you're talking about. It's like we're not a good enough mother, not a good enough friend, not a good enough human, not a good enough woman, not a good enough wife. And so like the list continues to go on. And so now you have anxiety that's activated. And once anxiety like feels like it has no semblance of control, now we open the door for the best friend, which is depression. And so depression comes in because it's like, oh, you feel hopeless. Okay, let me come in and support you. And so they're coming in to try to support, but
Yeah.
it's an unhealthy and toxic relationship. It's almost like those friends that you love, but you can't let go, but you know you need to in order for you
Yeah.
to grow. And that's that relationship between anxiety and depression. They come to each other's rescue most often. And so when you see one, if one is going unmanaged for so long, you're normally going to see the other.
Yeah.
Either I don't want anybody to see I'm depressed, so I'm always trying to like hide it and like
Yeah.
be on guard. And so like that runs up the radar for anxiety, or I'm always anxious and I don't want anybody to see it, and to the point where my system just shuts down on me. And then I start to feel the lack of motivation, the idea of hopelessness. So all those things sometimes like crash into each other because we're trying to survive it by ourselves. And like I said, we're not meant to survive, we're meant to thrive.
Yeah.
Survival is hunting. Like an animal goes and hunt for a season or for a meal, and it comes back and it rests. And if I'm a human always in survival mode, what do you think is happening?
Yeah. There is no rest. There's no coming back after the season of hunting.
Right, right. Like there's no downtime, even when
Yeah.
I'm sleeping.
100%. So, okay. So we've just talked about, you've just talked about anxiety being the friend of depression, and basically a lot of it is that closing up, right?
Yeah.
That not being vulnerable. Last time we talked, I asked you, what are your thoughts on the phrase "fake it until you make it"?
Ooh, yes. So, I was probably the cover girl for Fake It Till You Make It, apparently, if you hear my story. And I now know from experience and watching myself grow, I know that is one, a survival technique, and two,
Yeah,
it is not necessary to like live a wholehearted life.
yeah,
Like, if I want to live a wholehearted life, I have to let that quote go. I have to let that saying go, fake it till I make it, because that
yeah,
is saying that, like, I'm going to suffer by myself until I figure out how to get out. And not
yeah,
knowing that my friends who are also therapists who are seeing these things inside of me are like wanting to link together to pull me up, and I'm not allowing them to pull me up, so I remain stuck longer than I need to, or remain stuck and never get out, just period. And
yeah.
so that idea of fake it till you make it, I think we've been taught it, but it also have like breeded some of the most anxious people and
Yeah.
in the world, because it's like I'm always trying to make it happen, but it always feels like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm
Yeah.
looking around the corner trying to like just figure it out by myself, and not knowing that Shelly over here or Danielle's over here may have the resource, but I am frightened to ask for the resource
Yeah.
because I don't want any unwanted identity.
Yeah.
And so I don't want the idea that I'm weak. I can't handle it. I can't figure it out by myself. When in reality, we can't be those people all the time. If
So
I want to
true.
do it all by myself all the time, if I don't want to seem weak ever, like, I'm probably going to be the weakest out of the bunch because I'm trying to hold on to too much.
Yeah, 100%. It's juggling the glass plates. You put more and more on, and then you drop them because you literally can't.
Right. Right. Like, just like I'm a power source, but any power source, the battery life goes down. And so I got to know what I'm plugging into to recharge. And so
Hmm.
if I'm not allowing my outside people to like allow me to like plug into them, or allow
Yeah,
myself to plug into them, I'm not recharging. And so I'm constantly giving, giving, giving from a sense of scarcity and depletion.
I love that. We're gonna tweet that, by the way. Credit Nakayla Legget. Seriously, that's so good. You're a power source, and you have to figure out where you're gonna plug into because you still have to recharge.
Yeah, like you give so much, but you also
Yeah,
have to like be the person who receives as well.
yeah, yeah.
Because if I don't charge this iPhone over here or this laptop that I'm talking on, it's no purpose. It serves
Yep,
no purpose at that point. And so like I have to do that, be that way as a human as well.
100%. Um, so what were some of the things so we've talked about vulnerability and how in order to build this resilience, you have to be vulnerable. What are some of the activities that you did to start building this vulnerability in yourself?
Um, I've all ever since I was a little girl, I loved poetry. So writing was like one of my techniques
Cool.
I really enjoyed, that I let go, because like once you start floating in the idea of shame, creativity is one of the first things that go. And so like
For
Renee
sure.
talks
Yeah.
about that a lot as well. And so like that like went by the wayside. And so the first thing I thought to do was pick up my pen and write, because that's what I did to
Love that.
survive my childhood. I wrote, and
Yeah.
like I constantly talked about love in my writing, constantly
Yeah.
talking about like developing like this sense of like belonging, and like being able to just survive enough to like smile. And
Yeah.
so that is the first thing that popped into my head. And so like when that 3 week mark, that book, that children's book that I talk about, Mama Wise My
Mhm.
Flower Wilton, I wrote that
Yeah.
book in 48 hours.
Wow.
I wrote it in 48 hours because it was basically a book on bullying. And that was my first experience of basically understanding how to take a lesson out of an adverse experience for myself. Like I know how to
Wow.
guide someone through it, but that was my first experience of being extremely vulnerable with myself,
Mhm.
because that idea of this girl, she's going through like this series of bullying in school, but she's afraid to tell her mother. And she's afraid of telling her mother because like she doesn't know what the outcome would be, and so she
Yeah.
starts to like have these disruptive behaviors. And with with that idea, the lens that I wrote the book, I wrote it from a lens that if I would have told my mother about my bullying experience, that is how I want her to that is how I want her to, in a sense, respond.
Yeah.
I want her to guide me. I want her to like show me that I am beautiful regardless of what they're saying to me at the school. Like really be the water and the nourishment that like replenishes and like um allow my flower to resprout and like give it
Yeah.
life again. And that is what the saying, Mama, why is my flower wilting? Like she was the flower that was wilting. She had a flower as a visual, but the idea was internal. Like she
Wow.
was like, as she was like dying emotionally, her
Mhm.
flower was also dying because she wasn't taking care of the things that she once loved. And that
Yeah.
included her flower and herself. And so that in a sense is like how I would have loved. And I'm sure my mom, like if I would, my mom was one of those like mama bears. It's like, I will fuss at you and I will like make this like argue with you all day, but nobody's gonna bother you. And so, but it was just that fear of like, I just didn't either. I don't know really if it was a situation where I just didn't want to put more on her, or
Yeah.
I didn't want to be deemed as like weak once again, or I didn't want to understand, I didn't want to chance the fact of like her blaming me for the bullying occurring. And
Yeah.
so I had this anxiety, just what ifs going through my brain. And so like that in itself would be like my answer for that. So just like
Awesome.
understanding.
That's so good. And one of the things I love about children's books is that they're lessons for kids and adults. Like
Yes.
as a mom, you've totally read these children's books and now it clicks. Like now you're an adult and you're reading it and you're like, I know what they're
Oh,
trying to say. I get it now. And then
right. Right.
a kid, I mean, it's the same thing we're trying to do here, right? It's
Yeah.
listening to stories helps us connect to things in our lives, and that's why children's stories are so important, and why authors like you, people like you, with a clinical background, right, can write these stories and actually start to plant these seeds of, hey, it's okay to tell your parents about these things, and hey, mom, this is how you should be responding when your kid
Yes.
comes to you. It's so important. And
Mm-hmm.
it's teaching kids vulnerability.
Yes.
Their vulnerability is their superpower, and that's
It's their
how they become these resilient big people.
yes. Yes.
I love that.
Absolutely.
I
Like I
love it.
really love that idea. Like you have to groom and guide.
Yeah.
That's your whole purpose as a caregiver.
Yeah. I love
Like
it.
you're a caregiver teaching them how to care so they can give it later
Yeah.
to themselves
Yeah.
and to others.
Yep. Yes. Generational teaching.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Generational teaching. Like let's go away from generational curses and let's like
Mm,
transitional to generational teaching.
yeah.
Like disrupting all of those cycles and
Yeah.
not necessarily just telling them from like a story just to tell a story, but from a lens of like growth and lessons and
Yeah.
like let's try it this way because mommy tried it that way and it just was not productive. It kept her stuck longer than she needed to be stuck. So let's try it a different way. And you
Yeah.
may get stuck in other arenas and other areas, but if I teach you the blueprint of how to like maneuver in the world of being stuck, like you
Yeah.
will take that blueprint and apply it to more things.
Yeah.
And so that in itself like is like an opportunity just for life lesson. Like you wouldn't believe how often I reverse back to like school age times in my therapy sessions. Just like, you remember when you learned this in school?
Yeah.
Let's apply this to your emotional.
That's
and I get it. Like I am the analogy. That is me. That is another one of my superpower. My love language is words of affirmation. So and I'm a visual learner. And so I love to create like this visual in your brain so you can connect the dots. Like that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very clear from the pillow analogy. That's good. Well, we are just at the very last part of this episode, last couple minutes. I have one big question that I ask all the guests. Are you ready?
I think so. I don't know.
It's not scary at all, but I am going to put you on the spot. What is the one lesson about resilience that you want the listeners to know?
The one lesson that I want the listeners to know about resilience is we all have the tenacity to experience resilience. We all have access to it. Determination comes into play is how vulnerable you're in order to experience it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nakayla.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I had a great time today.
Good. I'm so grateful to you for coming on and sharing your story and sharing your wisdom. I'm really grateful to have you as a professional in your field too, because it's important to me. Sharing our stories is wonderful, but I know a lot of times people want to hear it from the experts too. And so you are now our resident expert.
Want to know that we're human too, and you're not just walking into somebody who's like, oh, this is the cookie cutter information that you have. Like, that is the first connection that I have with my patients, and I want you to know that I'm human too. And I don't go around just sharing my patients just because like it's an opportunity to share my story, but being able to like be comfortable with your story, you're able to like pick snippets of it and give the lesson without even giving the detail.
Yeah. It's a little bit of vulnerability, but also,
boundaries. Also boundaries, right? And being ethical. Like, I don't need you crying about my story. I need to like process your own stuff, because you crying about other people's story is more than likely the reason why you're sitting in here, because you didn't have like the ability to process or the space to process your own, because you were protecting and like allowing other people to survive through you. So. Yeah,
100%. So don't anyone cry about Nakayla's story today.
No, please don't. Use it as growth. Yeah. That's what I did. Like, I had my moments of tears. I think I am like, now my tears mean many different things. It can mean tears of sorrow, tears of relief, tears of joy. It's just so many different combinations of why tears happen.
Yeah.
So
100%.
if you're going to cry, hopefully it's tears of relief to say like, I can get support. I can be okay. I can get better. I can grow. Yeah, sure you can. Let's be resilient together.
I love it. Thank you so much. You are amazing. Thank you for coming on the show. For everyone who's listening, we will have links to Nakayla's books in the show notes, as well as to her social media. And as soon as she gets that private practice open, we'll post a link to her website too, so you know who to call, schedule an appointment with.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nakayla.
You're welcome.
On our next episode of the Life Story Podcast, I'll be speaking with Erica Donnell, mom of 4 and a warrior for women battling with anxiety and other mental health issues. After suffering from debilitating anxiety and panic attacks, Erica found that self-love was the strongest form of medicine and healing, and learned to love herself unapologetically. You won't want to miss Erica's episode and her radiant personality, So be sure to tune in to next episode of the Life Story Podcast, Season 1, Stories of Resilience. Bye for now.